10 spine-chilling encounters, terrifying home alone secrets from haunted Appalachia revealed. The wind howled like a banshee through the streets of Pine Hollow, echoing legends of the dark woods that loomed just beyond Sarah's modest home. Every night, shadows danced in the corners of the living room, creeping, whispering. They told stories of families lost, betrayed by the very people they trusted. And tonight? Tonight felt different. Tonight felt alive. Sarah stepped inside, weary from a long shift at the diner. The air was thick with a stifling silence that pressed against her chest, and she instinctively called out for Ethan. "Hey, buddy. Ready for bed?" The only response was the relentless whir of the video game echoing from his room. She forced a smile, the kind that barely reached her eyes. It was all she had left to give. But something felt wrong. The flickering light bulbs cast eerie shadows on the walls, transforming familiar family photos into grotesque, ghoulish figures. She rubbed her temples, convinced it was the exhaustion playing tricks on her. Outside, the whispers grew stronger, rustling leaves, faint echoes of laughter twisted into cries. "Shut that door!" She yelled toward Ethan, who remained blissfully unaware, glued to his screen. She flipped the lock but couldn't shake the shiver that prickled at her neck. Something watched from beyond those walls. It always had. When the phone rang, the shrill sound jolted her. It was Mrs. Jenkins, the elderly neighbor. "Sarah. It's outside. I swear I saw it again." The frantic tremor in her voice sent a chill down Sarah's spine. "You need to be." The call ended abruptly, and Sarah was left staring at the receiver in disbelief. "Mom?" Ethan's voice broke through her spiral of fear. "What's the matter?" "Nothing, honey. Just, time to wrap up your game." As the minutes dragged into an eternity, Ethan's curiosity got the best of him. He rummaged through the attic, and a loud thud echoed through the house. The bone-deep silence returned, leaving her heart racing. "Ethan?" Then he came down, face pale, clutching an old photo album like it was a lifeline. Each page told tales of ancestors with hollow eyes and the troubling background of their families, some lost, some never to be found. With each worn photograph, Sarah felt a weight grow in her chest. The woods? They weren't just a cautionary tale. The shadows of her family loomed close. Before they could catch their breath, another call came through. It was Mrs. Jenkins again, voice quaking. "You need to get out, Sarah." "What's behind you?" The line went dead, silence drowning her thoughts. Now, she could feel it, something dangling right at the edge of perception. Her heart raced, thunderous against the stillness. Flickering lights cast frantic images on the walls, and shadows morphed into sinister shapes, edging closer. "Ethan," she whispered, fear gripping her voice. "Stay close and don't make a sound." "Mom?" He looked confused, but the fear in her eyes mirrored the shadows that stretched across the room. "Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. Just then, the air turned electric, as though something surged through the house. The walls seemed to breathe, heavy with the weight of long-buried secrets that cursed their family. Sarah peered cautiously out the window, her stomach knotting at the sight of familiar faces distorted, their eyes locked on her with a knowing gaze that felt so wrong. The townsfolk, their kindness now morphed into hollow specters. Was it just her imagination, or did they whisper of betrayal? With the forest darkening outside and the shadows getting bolder, she braced for the truth that their past had clawed its way back to haunt them. Something was closing in, and as she prepared to confront the figure lurking just outside, she wondered if their history would reclaim them. And as that helpless question lingered in the air, a shadow moved against the wall. The lights flickered once again, the darkness revealing something or someone that was just waiting for the right moment to strike. The shadow extended and coiled like smoke, slithering along the wall as if alive. Sarah's breath hitched in her throat as the temperature in the room dropped, a bone-chilling wave that held her captive. She reached for Ethan, her heart hammering in her chest, but he stood frozen, eyes wide with terror. "Mom, I can't. I can't move." His voice trembled. Sarah felt a prickle of fear race down her spine. "You must. We can't let it, whatever it is, get to us." With each second, the darkness festered, pooling closer, seeping into their sanctuary like an insidious fog. "Turn off the lights," Ethan yelled, desperation leaking into his tone. She lunged for the light switch, fingers shaking, and flicked it off. Darkness rushed in, swallowing the last remnants of light. The shadows grew bolder, swirling around them, whispering sweet nothings that curdled her stomach. The kitchen door creaked open, an invitation to the unknown. Sarah gripped Ethan's arm tightly. "Stay here." She stepped toward the door, the chill wrapping around her like icy fingers. "Mom, please," Ethan pleaded, tugging on her shirt. One look at his fearful face stole her resolve. The whispers, too close now, seemed to beckon her closer still. "I'll be right back. Just wait." She edged forward, squeezing her eyes shut, willing herself to push aside the dread tightening her chest. The hallway stretched, dark and forbidding, with shadows that darted like fleeting glimpses of something monstrous. The whispers intensified, brushing against her ears, forming the fragments of words. Truths? Lies? She couldn't tell. Steeling herself, she turned the handle and swung the door open. "Mrs. Jenkins!" She called into the night, her voice breaking the thick silence that clung to the air. There was no answer, only the wind's mournful wail in response. Just beyond the threshold, the forest writhed, branches twisting like accusing fingers. Suddenly, a scream pierced through the quiet, high and shrill, echoing off the trees. It was unmistakably Mrs. Jenkins. "Help me!" The voice called, each word dripping with agony. Panic surged through Sarah as she turned to Ethan, motioning for him to stay put. He shook his head, tears escaping down his cheeks. But the scream rang out again, pulling at Sarah's resolve. "I have to go." "No. Mom!" Ethan cried, but his voice was swallowed by the night. She bolted into the darkness, the air heavy with fear as she ran toward the sound. Branches clawed at her clothes, the chill sinking deeper into her bones. The trees seemed to shift and crawl, their gnarled shapes looming above her, whispering secrets of betrayal and despair. "Mrs. Jenkins!" she shouted, fear coursing through her veins. And then she saw her caught between two boulders at the edge of the woods, shadowy figures hovering around her, their faces twisted into horrific grins. "Help me!" The old woman's voice came out as a rasp, and in that moment of desperation, recognition slid into place. Those faces. They were the same as the ones from the photo album. Sarah hesitated, a chill racing down her spine, realizing the truth: the shadows weren't just family ghosts, they were memories of debts unpaid. Family secrets clawed out of the dirt, engulfing the living in their icy grasp. "Get away from her!" she yelled, the anger powering her forward, but the shadows turned sharply, their eyes locking onto Sarah, the hunger in their dark depths circling her like vultures. "Join us," they whispered in unison, the night trembling around her. Ethan's frightened face haunted her mind. The shadows surged forward, reaching with outstretched hands. "Mom!" His voice echoed from a distance. And just as they were about to envelop her, a blinding light burst from behind, breaking through the fog of fear. "Mom!" Ethan's small voice cut through the eerie gathering, urgency laced through each syllable. "Ethan!" Sarah screamed, spinning back, but what she found stole the air from her lungs, the door stood ajar, and through it, she could see him standing, wide-eyed and terrified at the threshold. "You can't leave us." The shadows recoiled, their whispers fading, waiting for the perfect moment to pounce. Caught between the living and the dead, choices loomed heavy. What sacrifice must she make to save her son? The light dimmed again, leaving only the flickers of uncertainty, and as she teetered on the edge of fate, she knew this was just the beginning. What was left pending in the dark woods still awaited their answer, and the shadows hungered for more. The darkness pressed in on Sarah, thick and suffocating. Every instinct screamed at her to flee, to grasp Ethan's hand and retreat from whatever horror awaited in the woods. But the shadows pulsed hungrily, their forms shifting and rippling at the edges of her vision, beckoning her toward their twisted embrace. She turned back toward the door, her heart pounding fiercely in her chest. "Ethan!" she gasped, desperation spilling into her voice. "We need to go. Mom! Don't leave me." He was trembling, his small body shaking as he stood frozen at the threshold. The shadows whispered a chorus of dark promises, wrapping around Sarah, drawing her closer to the plight of Mrs. Jenkins. The old woman's spectral face was gaunt, surely ravaged by the shadows surrounding her. "Help me, please." Mrs. Jenkins' voice was gravelly, bursting with an unearthly desperation that echoed in Sarah's mind. It was a plea that sent shards of ice racing down her spine. "You must take her place." A raw wave of terror washed over Sarah. Take her place? What did that mean? The air felt charged, vibrating with malevolent energy. The shadows shifted again, revealing shapes she couldn't bear to look at. They were familiar yet horrific, drawing on memories she thought were buried, the silhouettes of family, lost and forgotten. "Mom!" Ethan's voice cut through her growing fear, anchoring her to the present. "Please." With a surge of bloody courage, she stepped away from the threshold, torn between the darkness and the pale light of safety. The shadows pulsed with anger, their whispers crescendoing into shrieks of fury, wrath rising from places long silenced. They sensed her fear, and it fed them, fueling their insatiable hunger. "Let her go." With each word, Sarah felt herself being tugged further into the abyss. She steadied her resolve, her mind racing. She recalled hearing whispers of old family legends of sacrifices made in forgotten corners of history, debts that tainted bloodlines. "Please. Don't hurt her," she shouted, but her heart raced with uncertainty. What was it that demanded blood, an offering to satiate the dark? The shadows seemed to absorb the weaker light of the barn as if drawn into their past, revealing glimpses of desperate faces trapped in a cycle of pain, yearning for release. Sarah couldn't stand to watch. "Leave her!" she cried again, her voice desperate now. She could feel the pull toward those figures, but Ethan's eyes were filled with tears, pleading for her, grounding her in reality. "You're not taking anyone." With a surge of defiance, she clenched her fists, letting anger wash over her like a fire against the icy grasp of the night. She turned her back on the shadows and made for Ethan, sword fighting the tightness in her chest. But the moment was fleeting. A cold hand gripped her ankle, bringing her crashing down. She stumbled, the familiar landscape morphing. Tendrils of mist curled around her limbs. A cacophony of voices reached a deafening pitch, drowning her in dread. "Join us," they whispered, layered voices filled with eeriness. "No!" she screamed with all her might, summoning the deepest essence of her fearlessness. "Let us go." But the shadows thrummed with delight, tightening their grip as Mrs. Jenkins' anguished cries echoed, flickering as shadows danced around her, stripped of humanity by time and despair. "Mom!" Ethan's voice faltered, panic rising in pitch. The shadows turned their insatiable hunger towards him, a myriad of hands reaching out. "No!" Sarah shot back, her body igniting with adrenaline. She charged toward the darkness, determined to shield her son. But was it too late? A blast of wind surged through the trees, scattering the shadows momentarily, and she seized the chance to break free. She yanked Ethan forward, their hearts racing in sync as a blinding flash of clarity sparked within her. They had to confront the truth, the tragedy that nestled deep within their home. As they stumbled back toward the door, the forest roared in wild fury, branches twisting ominously above them. The light flickered precariously, revealing the shadows. Gathering for one final assault, what awaited them inside that darkened threshold? Was their escape simply a momentary reprieve, or were they merely stoking the flames of an even darker fate? One question resonated through the night: when the shadows finally crossed that threshold, would they be ready to face what lay within? The door slammed shut behind them, the heavy thud echoing through the barn like a death knell. Sarah's heart stumbled in her chest. The brief reprieve was a cruel illusion, and now the encroaching shadows hissed at their back, clamoring with fury as if they had been thwarted in a hunt. "Mom, we have to run." Ethan's voice quivered, his small hand gripping hers like a lifeline. "I know." She gasped, her breath short and frantic. Fear pulsed like a drum in her ears, drowning out the eerie whispers that lingered in the barn. They turned towards the yawning darkness at the far end, the promise of escape leading them deeper into the unknown. "Where do we go?" Ethan's eyes darted around, glinting with panic. The barn's interior morphed under the dim light, shadows weaving like snakes. He tugged at her, desperate for direction, and all she could muster was a frantic look back at the door, sensing the malevolence clawing behind them. "Anywhere but here," she murmured, dragging him along as the ground beneath their feet shifted unsettlingly, as if reality itself trembled. The air thickened, tasting of old regrets and lost hope. They stumbled through a narrow passage, racing against the murmured threats that echoed through the darkness. But the path was treacherous. Sarah's foot caught on a knot of rough wood, sending her sprawling. The world tilted violently as she fell. Ethan's scream pierced the night as he tried to catch her. "Mom!" She landed hard, the rough floorboards biting into her skin. Scrambling back to her feet, she looked up just in time to see a shadow coalesce by the door, a figure darker than the night surrounding them. It stood disturbingly still, its form shifting and churning like ink spilled in water. "Join us," it crooned, its voice slithering into her mind, seducing her with haunting echoes of forgotten dreams. "You'll never be alone again." "No!" Sarah shouted, her words tearing through the shroud of despair. It threatened to pin her to the ground. Clenching her jaw, she rose, pushing back on the panic clawing at her throat. She had to protect Ethan. He was the only light left in this suffocating blackness. "Where are you, Mom?" Ethan shrieked, eyes wild and frantic as he backed away from the looming dark figure. As though the shadows sensed her determination, they shifted ominously, rippling against the walls, hungry to reclaim their lost prey. "Ethan, stay close," she urged, forcing herself to calm his visible dread. "We need to find the way out." He nodded, tears shining in his eyes, his small form trembling as he joined her side. Together, they moved further into the barn, its depths heavy with stale air and whispers of old fears. Every creak of the wooden beam sounded like a warning, shadows threatening from every corner, a relentless tide of darkness. Then, as they ventured into the recesses of the barn, Sarah spotted a glimmer of light flickering in the distance. But her hopeful heart sank as she realized it came from an old lantern swinging from the ceiling. The moment she registered it, the light flickered ominously, the shadows growing thicker around its glow. "Is it safe?" Ethan whispered, his innocent gaze searching for a sign of reassurance. "Only one way to find out," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. As they approached the lantern, a chill swept through the barn, biting harshly against their skin. The light flickered again, revealing a doorway behind it, a portal murky with shadow, edges bleeding dark mist. "Mom!" Ethan's voice quivered, and she could feel the fear tightening around his throat as they approached. "Just stay with me," she replied, anxiety mixing with a surge of resolve. They moved toward the doorway, every instinct urging them to flee. Yet, the shadows followed, insistent and cruel, eager to consume them both. What lay on the other side? Would it lead to salvation or damnation? Time ticked slowly, each second stretching as they stood poised on the brink. With a deep breath, Sarah reached for the handle, only to hear a low growl emanate from the shadows behind them. "Mom, it's coming." And just like that, before she could even turn, the shadows lunged forward, and panic seized her heart once more. Could they escape the nightmares lurking within? The handle felt icy under Sarah's fingertips, her heart skipping as the shadows surged closer. She threw her weight against the door, feeling its resistance pull back. A low, guttural roar vibrated through her bones, filling the air with dread. The shadows were alive, undulating, rushing towards them like smoke seeking to reclaim its source. "Mom!" Ethan's voice broke her focus. She turned to see him clutching a beam, terror painted on his face. "Ethan, please!" she cried, urgency clawing at her throat. She twisted the handle, praying the door would yield as panic hissed in her ears. It gave way with a reluctant creak, a breath of stale air rushing forth, sharp with the scent of decay. They stumbled into a room swathed in gloom, illuminated only by the flickering lantern behind them, a flicker that left behind a dying echo of hope. The doorway slammed shut, the sound rattling through the dark chamber. "Where are we?" Ethan whispered, eyes wide, scanning the room. "Shoo!" Sarah hushed him, holding her breath, the silence feeling oppressive. She took a step forward, and the wooden floorboards complained beneath her. Shadows pooled in the corners, thick as treacle, waiting, watching. Suddenly, a soft sound broke the stillness, a rasping laugh, laced with malice. It rolled around them like smoke in the air, filling the space with a palpable sense of dread. "Lost little lambs?" A figure emerged from the shadows, skeletal and hunched, dressed in tattered clothes that hung loosely from its gaunt frame. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, a mix of longing and hunger. "Who are you?" Sarah managed, her voice a fragile whisper, fear tightening around her chest like a vice. "Just a friend," it hissed, lips curling into a mockery of a smile. "A friend who provides warmth." Ethan trembled at her side, and Sarah could feel the weight of his fear pressing against her. The figure lifted a long, bony finger, beckoning them closer. "Don't be afraid," it crooned, its voice dripping with false sweetness. "I can help you get away from us." Sarah shouted, gripping Ethan tight, and they began to backtrack, inching toward the door they had just entered only for it to dissolve into dark mist, leaving them alone with this thing. "Why would you want to leave?" It croaked, moving in fluid motions, black coils of shadow curling behind it like serpents. "The darkness keeps you safe, sheltered from the world outside." "No!" she cried, a surge of defiance igniting within her. She had to protect her son. "We want to go home." The figure's laughter swelled, filling the narrow expanse, a haunting melody that pulsed with despair. "Home?" it echoed, disdain dripping from the word. "What worth does it have? This world is empty. Give in to the shadows. Embrace it." A whispering wind filled the space around them, shuddering with long-lost echoes, voices from the past entwining into a haunting chorus. Sarah felt the chill wrap around her heart, clogging her mind, making her hesitate. "Mom!" Ethan's voice broke through, sharp and insistent. "Don't listen." Fighting against the weight of the shadows, Sarah took a breath, grounding herself, channeling every ounce of love she had for her son. "We're not giving in. We will find a way." With a fierce strength, she pulled Ethan toward a corner of the room, where the lantern cast a weak light, trying to illuminate their escape. But the figure lunged, a flurry of darkness surging in their direction, intent on dragging them back into its abyss. "Run!" she yelled, and together they crashed against a wall, desperate for anything that resembled safety. The shadows thickened, swirling as tendrils reached for them, clawing through the air. Adrenaline burned in Sarah's veins as she scanned the room, searching for any possibility of escape. "Emom!" Ethan screamed as a darkness swept over him, threatening to swallow him whole. No! With a primal roar, Sarah lunged forward, reaching out to grasp his wrist, pulling him back just as tendrils writhed under her fingers. But then, she saw a flicker of something behind the shadows that caught her eye. A door, barely visible against the chaos swirling around them, a glimmer of hope just beyond this suffocating nightmare. "Ethan, the door!" she yelled, and with renewed determination, she tugged at him toward that brief shine of light. They raced forward, feet pounding against the floor, hearts racing against despair. But the flesh of darkness chased them relentlessly, filling their ears with the sinister whispers of despair. As they neared the door, Sarah felt the coldness clutch at her, a pulse of terror vibrating through her body. The shadows were almost upon them. "Just a little closer," she shouted, pushing every ounce of will into their last burst of speed, and then she swung the door open, but the scene that greeted them sent bile rising in her throat, a sweep of barren land, rolling fog, and a twisted forest that loomed like teeth against an ashen sky. "Mom!" Ethan screamed, clinging to her, frozen in terror. Behind them, the shadows surged, roaring with fury, and Sarah stood paralyzed on the threshold. Was the outside world more horrifying than the darkness they had escaped? "Make the choice." The skeletal figure rasped, its laughter mocking, echoing in her ears. Could they truly step outside into the unknown, or would they succumb to the very nightmares they fled? With every moment stretching painfully, Sarah's heart raced as she prepared to leap into the uncertainty what awaited them in the wild beyond. The moment Sarah stepped into the light, the air crackled with an energy that felt both alive and hostile. The fog swirled around their feet, chilling them to the bone, and the twisted trees loomed overhead like ancient sentinels, their gnarled branches scratching at the sky. "Mom, I don't like it here." Ethan's voice trembled, his small figure shivering beside her. They hesitated, fear both familiar and foreign wrapping around them like a heavy shroud. Sarah glanced back. The doorway they had fled through was now gone, swallowed by the mist. Panic surged. "Ethan, we have to keep moving," she urged, forcing her feet to take a step into the unknown. As they moved forward, the ground beneath them shifted, uneven and treacherous, each step accompanied by unsettling crunches, perhaps the remnants of what lay before them. "Where do we go?" Ethan's whisper was barely audible, his eyes darting nervously towards the trees. "Find a way out. We have to find shelter," she murmured, determination forcing its way through her own rising fear. But then came the sounds, the whispers. The low, haunting sighs threaded through the trees, wrapping tighter around their minds. Sarah's heart raced as they weaned deeper into the forest. "Stay close," she warned. Still, shadows danced on the periphery of her vision, swaying as if something unseen lurked behind them. With every step, the oppressive weight of despair clawed at her throat. The very woods felt alive, watching, waiting. A sense of urgency surged as they pressed onward, desperate for escape, yet the trees tightened their grip, forming a twisting maze of darkness. Suddenly, a chilling laughter echoed through the air, cutting through the silence like a blade. "You think you can escape?" it taunted, the voice disembodied and cruel. Ethan gasped, grabbing his mother's hand tighter. "What is that?" "I don't know, but we have to move," she urged. The laughter morphed into a cacophony, overlapping as if 100 voices were mocking her. "Darkness embraces all," the echoes taunted, a chorus of dread that seemed to pulse through the ground beneath them. They stumbled into a clearing, where the trees parted like a curtain revealing a sinister sight. A crumbling cabin sat at the center, shadows clinging to its broken walls. Vines twisted around the rotting door frame, as if trying to pull it back into the earth. "Mom, it looks scary." Ethan's voice cracked, his wide eyes filled with fear. It might be safe inside, Sarah reasoned, weighed down by the desperate need for protection. But dread loomed over her, an almost tangible force pulling her toward the darkness she tried to escape. As they approached the cabin, each creak of the wooden floorboards under her feet echoed through the quiet, a foreboding reminder of the isolation surrounding them. She turned the knob slowly. It protested vehemently, but at last, the door opened with a reluctant moan. The cabin interior was dim and cluttered, filled with furniture draped in white sheets, like ghosts awaiting their turn to awaken. A chill swept through the space, and Sarah felt a shiver race down her spine. What if it's... Ethan started, but she cut him off. Just stay close, Ethan. We'll be okay, she lied, trying to convince herself as much as him. But something about the atmosphere felt wrong, heavy with terrible secrets. As they stepped inside, a gust of wind slammed the door shut behind them, shrouding them in an almost suffocating silence. Did you hear that? Ethan whispered, tremors shading his voice. Before Sarah could respond, a figure emerged from the shadows, illuminated only by the flickering of a dying oil lamp. Welcome, it slithered, voice sing-song and too sweet to be sincere. Who are you? Sarah demanded, adrenaline firing through her veins. Just a friendly host, it said, advancing, but its smile held not a hint of warmth. Do you need help? An uneasy feeling pooled between them as the shadows danced in the corners of her vision, and she tried to back away, pulling Ethan with her. We need to go. Oh, but you're already home, the creature purred, the smile growing wider, exposing teeth that glinted with malice in the dim light. A pulse of terror rushed through Sarah's body. The air thickened, and she felt the walls closing in, shadows tugging at her sanity. Mom, Ethan whimpered, his voice barely above a whisper. Driven by fear, she tightened her grip on his hand and bolted toward the back window, heart hammering, mind racing. There had to be a way out and escape from this nightmare. But just as they reached the window, a force from behind roared, a sound filled with anguish that reverberated deep within their souls, echoing with the promise of despair. Leave or stay, the creature's voice called from the darkness, a whisper that dripped with malice. As Sarah slammed her shoulder against the window, desperation surging through her, she felt a cold grip on her wrist. The shadows were pulling her back, inching closer to where she had fought so hard to escape. She had to choose. Fight or flee. The shadows writhed, filled with tormenting whispers, and Sarah knew, at that moment, that they were far from alone. Would they have the strength to confront the terror, or would they become another whisper lost to the darkness? The grip on Sarah's wrist tightened, icy fingers of shadow pulling her away from the window, away from hope. Panic erupted within her, a primal scream clawing its way up her throat. She yanked her arm, fighting against the suffocating darkness that swarmed around them, swirling like a living entity. Ethan! Run! She shouted, her voice breaking through the chaos. Ethan stood frozen, his terrified eyes wide as he processed her command. But terror trumped disbelief as he turned to sprint back into the cabin, toward a door that led deeper into the suffocating gloom. No! This way! Sarah shouted, but he had already dashed past shelves lined with dusty jars and tangled relics. Shadows flickered, the creature's grin curling as it watched them with predatory pleasure. With desperation fueling her, Sarah lunged forward, her heart pounding against her ribcage like a wild thing. She stumbled after Ethan, the house shifting as if responding to their fears, walls closing in tighter. The floor creaked ominously beneath them, as if the cabin itself were alive, holding its breath while they fought for theirs. Ethan! She called again, her voice ragged, echoing into the abyss. Ahead of her, she caught a glimpse of movement. Ethan had found another room, the door half open, light flickering from within. She followed, feeling the shadows grasp at her heels, whispering their promises of despair. Inside, the room was dimly lit by an antique lamp, its light sputtering and dying like the last flicker of hope. Old photographs lined the walls, their subjects long forgotten, faces twisted in agony which seemed to mirror the terror that enveloped them now. Mom! Ethan's voice quivered as he pointed to a figure huddled in the corner, draped in shadows. Get back! Sarah ordered, instinctively placing herself in front of her son, heart racing as she peered into the darkness. The figure unfurled, revealing an emaciated woman, her eyes hollow and wild. Help us, the woman rasped, her voice carrying the weight of despair. Get out while you can. Who are you? Sarah demanded, unable to contain the quaver in her voice. The house, it hungers, the woman choked out, eyes wide with madness. It feeds on fear. It needs you. Ethan whimpered, inching closer to his mother's side, and for a fleeting second, the shadows receded, pulling back like frightened children. Sarah instinctively moved toward the woman but halted, knowing they were not safe. Before she could recover, the cabin trembled, and the voice of their captor slithered through the air, dark and mocking. Why so curious? You know what you must do. Embrace the darkness. The air became electric, oppressive. Sarah felt the weight of unseen eyes watching, waiting for her next move. Caution gripped her, she needed to keep Ethan safe, needing to push past the confusion. Stay close. She whispered fiercely to her son. We can't trust her. The woman's voice turned desperate. You think you'll find peace in the light? You're already in its grasp. Her laughter morphed into a shriek that reverberated through the walls, cutting Sarah deep. With renewed determination, Sarah gripped Ethan's hand. Let us find a way out. She urged, but the feeling of despair gnawed at her spirit, a poison coursing through their veins. As they darted back towards the main room, every shadow seemed to conspire against them, every creak of the floorboards a last warning. They saw the doorway leading to the outside world, but a thick fog churned outside, a wall of darkness that promised them nothing but the unknown. Mom! Ethan cried, pulling her back, what if it's worse out there? She hesitated, heart pounding in her chest. Would leaving the cabin mean embracing the thing that lurked in the fog? Or was there no escape at all? Then, a low growl emanated from the walls, a sound of something dark awakening. The whispers grew louder, chanting a sorrowful melody that sent shivers down her spine. The creature's laughter returned, echoing in a nightmarish tone, urging her to give in. Leave or stay, came the voice, punctuated by an unsettling stillness that felt like a death knell. Hold on, Ethan! She shouted, pulling him toward the door. But the room around them vibrated with an unnatural energy, the shadows tightening their grip, an unseen force pushing against them. As they reached for the door, something lurched in the corner of her eye. She caught sight of the woman again, now standing tall, her face twisted in fury, revealing something grotesque beneath the guise of humanity. What will you choose? The woman shrieked. Terror surged through Sarah. They couldn't remain here. They had to break free. Just as she turned the handle, a scream ripped through the air, the shadows seething and gathering, ready to confront them. Would they face the horror inside, or plunge into the darkness outside? In that moment, Sarah knew she had to make a choice, but the weight of that decision would reshape their fate forever. As Sarah's hand tightened around the door handle, the chill of the cabin's air seeped deeper into her bones. The woman's fury cast a shadow that threatened to swallow them whole. Sarah felt the weight of the room pressing in, folding around her like a vice. No! The scream burst from her lips as she flung the door open, spilling them into the shrouded outside. Fog twisted before them, thick and clammy, wrapping around their ankles like cold fingers. Ethan hesitated, eyes darting back toward the looming cabin, the faint glow behind the windows painting the walls in ghastly colors. Keep moving. Sarah urged, pulling him forward, desperation lacing her words. The air outside was thick with an unnatural silence, the woods beyond the cabin holding their breath. Every step they took felt like a step deeper into an abyss without end. They stumbled through the fog, the world around them fading into shades of gray. Shadows danced in her peripheral vision, flickering just out of sight, making her heart race. Behind them, the cabin was both a distant terror and a looming presence, promising that the darkness had not given up its hold. What if it's worse out here? Ethan whispered, voice trembling, his small hand gripping hers like a lifeline. Trust me, she said fiercely. We can't go back. They moved blindly, the fog thickening as if pushing them away from the cabin. The trees closed in, the branches clawing at their clothes, a dark congregation watching their every move. A rustle in the underbrush made Sarah freeze. Fear coiled around her heart as she turned, heart pounding like a war drum in her chest. "Is someone there?" she called, voice more confident than she felt. Silence answered, the kind that draped over them like a shroud, almost too still. Ethan pressed closer, and in that moment, Sarah felt raw power in her protective instincts. She could feel the shadows tugging at them, trying to pull them back into the cabin. "Mom," Ethan's voice trembled further. I think I see something." She turned to where he pointed, but the fog twisted the world into an uneasily familiar distortion. Shapes emerged, impossibly elongated figures with sunken eyes, standing just beyond reach, vibrating with an energy like a low hum, resonating deep within her bones. "Run!" The word sliced through the air, and they darted into the woods, heart racing, breathing ragged. The laughter of the subsequent shadows echoed behind them, cruel and mocking, rising like a storm. Branches jabbed at them, tearing through skin and clothing as Sarah veered wildly through the undergrowth. Shadows dashed after them, hungry for the fear that emanated from their pounding hearts. Then, just as a sense of dread threatened to overtake them, they stumbled upon a clearing, the sliver of moonlight slicing through the fog. In the center was an ancient well, moss-covered stones glistening ominously. It seemed otherworldly, too still, too sinister. "What is this place?" Ethan gasped, eyes wide. The shadows halted at the edge of the clearing, a ravenous pack that seemed to waver and blink in the fragments of moonlight. Sarah felt as if the earth itself was trembling, alive with anticipation, waiting for a choice that now loomed over them like a suffocating net. This might be our only chance," she stammered, heart pounding as realization dawned. The whispers returned, gnawing at her mind with promises of salvation and escape. "We might have to confront it, face the truth." The well released a strange hum, calling out to them, beckoning them with a tantalizing promise. All she had to do was lean in, to give in. "What if it's a trap?" Ethan whimpered, fear gripped manifesting in his wide eyes. "Then we'll fight," Sarah replied, determination coursing through her. But inside, doubt lurked, dancing in rhythm with the shadows. With the darkness encroaching both within and around them, Sarah knew they had to make a decision fast. Should they confront the depth of the well, or would the dark embrace of the woods offer a darker fate? Time seemed to slip away like sand through her fingers, leaving only the weight of that choice behind. Ethan's breath came in ragged gasps, each inhale carrying a mix of the damp, cold air and the smell of decay from the underbrush. The well loomed before them like a dark mouth, ready to swallow anything that dared to approach. "Mom!" Ethan cried out, tugging on Sarah's sleeve. Confusion and fear danced in his eyes, reflecting the chaos swirling in her mind. She scrutinized the well, noticing the faint shimmer of water at its bottom. It whispered promises of release, freedom from the relentless shadows clawing at their heels. "Do you hear that?" Sarah whispered. The low hum called to her, a melody both enchanting and terrifying. It ghosted around her, weaving through her thoughts, luring her closer. "Maybe we should just keep running." Ethan's voice broke, but the words twisted into a plea. Deep down, he sensed the danger lurking beneath the well's inviting surface. "No!" Sarah snapped, urgency spilling from her. "We can't let them, whatever they are, control us. We need to fight." But her heart raced, a war drum conveying its own doubts. Ethan's eyes, wide with fear, scanned the fog-drenched woods surrounding them. "But where else can we go?" Shadows curled around the edges of the clearing, undulating like smoke, alive with a hunger that gnawed at their sanity. Deep within the fog, she thought she heard whispers, words twisted into a language she couldn't recognize but felt all too intimately. Dark, ancient warnings, spilled over like venom. "What if they want us to do this?" he whispered, trembling. He stepped back, but his feet seemed glued to the ground, almost as if the shadows were wrapping around his ankles, holding him in place. "Ethan, we have to decide. Right now." Her gaze returned to the well, its deep, dark maw widening with every heartbeat. "Let us go back," he begged, tears streaming down his cheeks. "Please." But the cabin had become an even more menacing silhouette through the fog, standing with a chilling sense of foreboding. The laughter she heard echoed through her mind, mocking her. It was clear, returning meant surrendering. They had to choose the well or remain a meal for the nightmarish shadows. The hum grew louder, vibrating through her bones, making her skin tingle. Dread twisted in her gut. "Ethan, what if this is how we take back control? Are you sure?" His voice trembled, each word thick with uncertainty. "No," she shouted, mentally shaking herself to stay focused. "We have no other option." She stepped forward, reaching for the older stones, their surfaces slick with moss. Hot breath rushed from her lips as cold wind beat against her face. The shadows quivered, creeping closer, tendrils of darkness stretching toward them like fingers. Something shifted in the air, something hungry. Suddenly, the earth rumbled, a low growl that echoed through the clearing. The well shook, and the water's surface splashed, sending droplets flying into the air. A ghastly face emerged from the depths, gaunt and twisted hollow eyes stared directly into her own, an abyss of malevolence that froze her blood. "Mom!" Ethan squeaked as the night closed in around them. Sarah felt her mind fraying at the edges, terror wrapping around her throat. "We have to." The tug-of-war between fear and desperation raged within her, yet determination flickered like a dying flame. The well called to her, wrapping around her thoughts. Every ounce of her being screamed, make a choice. So, where would they find salvation, in the well's dark embrace or surrender to the sinister shadows? Their fate gripped her mind tighter, giving her little time left to decide. Just as the darkness lunged, the well surged upward, a whirlpool of shadows forming at its mouth. Would they be swallowed whole, or could she unravel the nightmare? The ground beneath them quaked, sending tremors cascading through Sarah's body. The well seemed alive, pulsating with malevolence, ready to spring forth a nightmare. Yet, this was their only chance. "Ethan, listen to me," she shouted, urgency ringing in her voice. "We have to confront whatever it is in there. It's either that or let the shadows take us." Tears streamed down her son's cheeks, but she could see a flicker of resolve sparking behind his fear. The echoes from the well deepened, an invitation mixed with a threat. "We can't just stand here. If we stand still, if we let fear dictate our choices, we'll be lost forever." As if on cue, the darkness around them stirred, trying to shackle them in place. "Mom!" Ethan cried out, glancing nervously around. "I don't want to go in there." The shadows coiled toward Ethan, fingers stretching, hungry for tears and panic. "Then let us not go willingly," she declared, gripping her son's hand tightly. "We shall fight. Together." With a deep breath, Sarah made up her mind. She surged toward the well, her heart pounding like a galloping horse. The darkness seeped around her, whispering insidious things, trying to weave doubt into her mind. But she pushed forward, fueled by the fierce love she had for Ethan. "Together, Ethan. On 3. She declared, her voice unwavering, her eyes locked on him. "Okay." He choked out. 1, 2, 3. Hand in hand, they jumped toward the looming maw of the well, a leap of faith into the unknown. As they plunged downward, a bright light illuminated the depths of the well. Sarah felt warmth envelop her as the shadows shrieked, unable to chase them into the light. They fell, tumbling through a radiant inner chamber that pulsed like a living heart, shedding layers of darkness that had clung to them. "Hold on!" Sarah shouted, anchoring herself as they landed softly on the ground of a hidden cavern. The darkness that had threatened to engulf them faded, swept away by the warm embrace of luminescent orbs hovering around. Sarah's heart raced. Could this be their way back? Ethan's awestruck eyes reflected the radiant light. "What is this place?" "It's something different," she breathed, exploring their surroundings. Ancient walls carved with family history shone brighter than the darkness, their faces and names glowing with resolve. This is their truth, Sarah realized, touching the surface of the walls. These are the souls the shadows claimed. But look, there's light. They had stories we never knew. Enveloped in warmth, she felt old pain lift from her shoulders. Together, they moved through the cavern, revealing memories etched in stone. With every step, the burden of their fear and the pain of those whose stories had been forgotten transformed into knowledge. It was no longer just shadows but lost legacies, anguished souls seeking compassion and relief. Mom. I think we have to help them. Ethan brightened, the fear melting from his voice. I think you're right, Sarah nodded. Our family has to face the truth of our past to finally be free. They stood before a mural that depicted the horrors of betrayal, the lost family members, shadowed figures reaching for salvation. With a deep breath, Sarah and Ethan joined hands and stepped closer, their hearts beating as one. We're sorry, they whispered together. The cavern shook, light bursting forth, whispers transforming from agony to serene echoes of acceptance. The energies of the lost began to swirl, filling the cavern with warmth and light, their despair lifting like fog at dawn. Suddenly, the weight of despair that had clung to their backs like a heavy shadow began to fade. The shadows beyond the well shrieked in rage, but the light held steady, stronger together, united in purpose and sacrifice. Sarah and Ethan stood firm, heartbeats pulsing with each wave of light reverberating through their being. It's working. They're finding peace. Ethan cried, watching the dark specters slowly dissolve. As the last remnants of anguish lifted from the cavern, Sarah felt a fresh breath fill her lungs, a promise of escape, of freedom. The light grew brighter, weaving them back toward the surface world above. When they emerged, dawn broke. The golden hue of sunrise kissed the trees, illuminating the path ahead. The world felt renewed, the darkness banished beyond the shadows. And as they walked hand in hand along the safe path home, Sarah knew they had finally chosen life over despair, bridging the past with strength and courage. They had woven their own story, a tale of bravery that would carry on in the laughter and love that echoed through Pine Hollow. Did we really beat them, Mom? Ethan asked, looking up with hopeful eyes. We did, sweetheart, Sarah replied, pulling him close. We faced the darkness and brought forth the light. As they crossed their threshold, laughter faded into the distance. Beneath lingering shadows and abandoned fears, there shone a light that would guide them forever. You need to subscribe now to be part of our community as we unravel even more spine-tingling tales. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and show your support. And flood the comments section with your thoughts and theories about this heart-pounding conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see how this story ends. Your engagement keeps this incredible journey going.